Hello and welcome to the first video in this series where I will discuss the yamas and the niyamas. And my purpose, my intention with these videos is to bring a new perspective to them so that we can figure out how to make them practical and applicable to our lives. We will begin with Ahimsa. It is the first of the yamas and the niyamas, and we will follow them in their traditional chronological order. Ahimsa is probably one of the most fascinating and interesting of them all. I think so because this is the foundation that all of the others are built upon. You know, if the foundation is not solid, none of the others will stand up on their own. You take away the foundation and everything above it collapses. Ahimsa described as nonviolence. You know, if you don't treat yourself or others with kindness, there is no basis for the others to hold value. The first aspect of Ahimsa is the one that most readily comes to mind, and that is the aspect of physical violence, of having aggressive behavior, of assault. This is the first thing we think of when we think about harming others or having harm done to us. And one way that I like to teach these things in my teacher training courses is to be the devil's advocate, so to speak. So when you take on the role of devil's advocate, sometimes you interject an idea that maybe doesn't necessarily represent your personal beliefs, but it gets the person or people that you're talking to think about their belief from another perspective. And I think that it is helpful to consider the yamas and the niyamas from different perspectives to understand them more fully, to understand that they are not just a list of ancient commandments that were written in a text 2,000 years ago, but yet these are very organic ideals that still apply to all of us today. They are practical and they are actionable. And so it goes without saying that most of us certainly realize that harming others intentionally through physical means is not the best and most ideal way to go through life. But I'm going to make a strong argument here that in this reality that we call life, that there is a time and a place for every human experience or emotion. And that includes a time and a place for violence and aggression. Let's first look to nature. If anybody or any of you have ever walked in the mountains, we have a lot of areas like this in the Pacific Northwest of the United States where black bears and sometimes even grizzly bears are a real concern for hikers in wilderness areas. And you know that if you ever come across a cub or a baby bear, that you best beware because the mother is likely not far behind. And if you ever mess with a mama bear's cub, then you are about to be at the receiving end of a very ferocious beast who's out to preserve and take care of her offspring. And so place any one of us in a situation where we felt that our loved ones are threatened or in danger. And I would argue that there is a case for strong action to resolve that situation. And then, of course, once the danger has subsided, then any continuous violent action would then become unnecessary and start to break this yama of Ahimsa, this commandment of nonviolence. One of the things that often comes up in some social circles, particularly yoga circles, is that of causing harm to animals through the foods that we eat, through eating meat, and understanding that the production of these things is harmful to the environment. These are certainly true, and things that we should all keep in mind in our choices and decisions about our nourishment and how we conduct ourselves. But also, everything must be placed in context. Without context, rules are by and large meaningless. One example that I'll talk about is that of the fisherman. So we know that the oceans are being overfished. We know that animals feel distress when we eat them. But is the fisherman breaking a rule of Ahimsa when he comes from a family of fishermen? His father was a fisherman, as was his grandfather, as was his great-grandfather before him. He was raised in this environment, and this is all that he knows. This is how he cares for and feeds his own family. If he were to stop doing the only thing that he knows how to do to provide for his family, he would then, in essence, be causing harm to them, would he not? Similarly, the rancher who raises cattle for market, or one that probably strikes closer to home to most of us in the yoga world who tend to actually do a lot of traveling. We do our retreats, we go on our pilgrimages to various locations, to India often. We all know that traveling creates a lot of greenhouse emissions. We know that jet fuel is harmful for the environment. And so you could make a strong argument that we are no different in essence than any of these other possible avenues of causing harm. We should be very careful about casting stones or throwing judgment towards others without understanding the circumstances fully, without trying to see things from more than our own perspectives all the time. It might be quite controversial to say that, yes, global warming is a problem. Yes, overconsumption of resources is a problem. But at the same time, the root cause of these problems itself is probably overpopulation. So does the couple who has a child, knowing that current practices in this world are unsustainable for 8.5 billion people, are they causing harm to the world too? Now, I'm saying this not to try to offend anybody, although it might, and I'm fine if this is slightly triggering as you consider and think about it. But my point is that the world is very, very complex. It's made of many shades of gray, and what's right or wrong is not always evident, and what is right and wrong to us might not be right or wrong for others. And so at best, what we can hope to do is consider that the choices that we need to make are for ourselves, and that we cannot make choices and decisions for others. The yamas and the niyamas can help us guide those choices and decisions, but to take them to great lengths to the extent of fundamentalism is in itself not a positive thing. One of the great yogis of all time, Mahatma Gandhi, he is accredited for his movements of nonviolence in the resistance to the British occupation of India. And he's accredited, his nonviolent resistance is often accredited to helping end the British rule of colonial India and bringing about India's independence. Now, one could argue that the British had lost any appetite for maintaining empire after World War II and no longer had the ability or the money to manage such an empire, and that was more responsible for the end of British occupation of India than any movements that Gandhi put together. as admirable as those movements were. At the same time, one of the movements of his that began all of it was the protests of the salt mines. And if you've never heard the story before, the British basically had a monopoly on the control and the manufacture and distribution of salt at the time. And Gandhi went to the ocean and picked up a chunk of salt to declare that they didn't need salt that was produced by the British. And he was subsequently thrown in jail for a time. And while he was in jail, he orchestrated a resistance movement. And so the protest occurred by essentially organizing an army of protesters to march in protest to the salt mine. And what would happen was that the protesters would be beat down by the guards, by the British guards. There was a photographer, a reporter on site to witness, to describe, to film this event. And witnessing these peaceful protesters who refused to defend themselves get beat down by the guards. I think a couple of them were even killed. This created a huge public sentiment against British colonialism and really helped propel his peace movement forward. However, I want to raise the question, though, that was it really nonviolence to walk into the salt mine knowing that the protesters would be beat down, knowing that there would be harm caused to them as a result of those actions, knowing that they were provoking this violence? Was that in itself actually a nonviolent action? And you might also be surprised to hear that there actually is a history of warriors, of a warrior tribe, a warrior caste within the realm of yoga. There are a sect of yogis called the Nagababas. And this is a group of yogis that are still around today. You've probably seen pictures on the internet at some time of the yogis who might only wear a loincloth or sometimes even no clothes at all. They typically have very long dreads and might carry a staff or a spear or sometimes an axe. This group of yogis are very respected and revered amongst the groups of yogis. They've been around for centuries. And one of the things that they're known for is of showing fierce displays of devotion to their cause. They will do what is seemingly outrageous things, such as hold an arm overhead for years at a time. They will stand on one foot whenever they are standing for years at a time. They will give up every possession that they own. Some have even been known to break their penises so that they are no longer controlled by sexual urges. In ancient times, these yogis were called upon to protect and defend Hindu temples or yogic temples against invading tribes, against Muslim invaders, against British occupiers. And because of their fierce devotion, these yogis could not be defeated unless they were killed. So my point in the story is that there is a history of warrior yogis. So violence is not devoid, or violence is something that is not non-existent in yoga history. I guess to summarize the topic about physical violence, one point I want to make is that I don't believe that ahimsa means to not defend yourself. You could make an argument that if you chose not to defend yourself, you would in essence be allowing harm or causing harm to yourself or to your loved ones. And the other aspect of ahimsa is not about physical violence at all. It's more about non-physical violence or verbal violence. Words can harm every bit as much as a blade can harm someone. In this modern world, we all talk a lot more than we have probability or possibility of physical altercations from. And so it's very much more likely that you will harm somebody with your words than you will through any physical means. Social media, for example. All of us are on our social media, whether it be Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or whatever it is that you spend your time on. Now, this is more of a rhetorical question. I don't expect you to answer it, but I'm going to ask it because I want you to process it, to think about it a little bit. Within the past year, have you been condescending to someone who didn't have the same beliefs as you? Whether that belief was about politics, about vaccinations, about their choices of food, about science, about religion, about the validity of Yoga Alliance. We as participants in the world, in our community, as yogis, we have to really consider if rudeness or condescension will ever actually change anybody's mind to see things our way or to see things your way. And we have to consider if continuing to do those things is really worth our energy, worth our spiritual energy. It is simply not reasonable to expect that everybody comes to an agreement on the same things. There are 8.5 billion people on this planet right now. It's inconceivable that we would all feel the same way about every topic. And we have to be willing to be okay with that. Differences in opinions shouldn't make us enemies. And we should really be conscious and avoid lashing out at people when they don't see the world our way, regardless of the topic. At the end of the day, we all have more in common with each other than we don't. News medias don't bring attention to this because they make money the more enraged everybody is. But at our core, we all have people that we care about. We all have responsibilities for our own bodies, for our homes, for the things that we care and attend to. And most of us, deep down inside, we really just want to be good people, and we want to be viewed in a positive light by the people who really know us. And this is true for all people, no matter what we believe. And to summarize this, or to bring this conversation to a close, there is an impossibility that you will go through this life without causing harm to others. You're going to say things that harm people, and you might accidentally do things that harm people. There's no way around it. An important distinction to make is that intention matters. As we go through life, as we make our mistakes, as others make mistakes, be willing to forgive. It doesn't make sense to hold something against somebody forever, to feel that you have to cancel them from ever holding a job, from ever holding a position in society. In fact, messing up, failing is the best way to learn about the type of person that we want to be, about the type of friendships that we want to have, about the types of relationships that we want to be in. There is no better lesson than failing and learning from those failures or learning from those mistakes. So be kind to yourselves when you make mistakes, and remember to be kind to others when they make mistakes as well. And do our best to understand that the world is a complex place and that we all need to progress with a little bit of compassion and empathy. Ahimsa.